Today, we're going to be in Psalm chapter 46. If you do bring your own Bible or you take notes, you can mark your place in the 46th chapter of the book of Psalms. But I want to get started this morning by telling you about a writer and a computer science professor who's based out of Georgetown University. His name is Cal Newport. Cal got his start in the writing world with a couple of books that were designed to help students thrive in school. We'll throw them up on the screen. Some of his first books were titled How to Be a High School Superstar and How to Become a Straight A Student. But the book that really launched his career was his book entitled Deep Work, which was all about rules for focused success in a distracted world. The premise behind that book right there in the center was basically that there is one skill that is becoming increasingly rare and valuable in our economy. Now, you could kind of make the case that in order for a person to get good at things like computer programming or software engineers, business management, networking, creative work, whatever anyone wants to do, his thesis was that the first thing they need to do, the kind of fundamental skill that people need to develop, is what he identifies is the ability to focus. In our digital world where we all carry around the internet in our pockets, he says the ability to focus is becoming rare, but also valuable and meaningful. Now, this is true for like adults in their careers, but it's also true for students who are in school. In his book on becoming a straight A student, Cal interviewed several students from some of the nation's most competitive universities. And he found this trend that the students with the highest GPAs often spent less time on schoolwork than people with GPAs slightly underneath whatever the highest marks were. And the common theme that he found was that the people with the highest GPAs, when they wrote papers, when they studied for tests or whatever it was, they gave that exercise their full, undivided attention. So as a result, they were able to produce better work in shorter amount of time compared to the people who did homework with their phone right next to them. Now, maybe that inspires you to go on the rabbit trail of what it looks like to do better in school, but that's not the focus of my sermon today. I said all that just to make the point that there is a lot of growing research in the value in being able to focus on something, especially because we live in a very distracted digital world. According to the Center for Humane Tech, many of us go through this kind of pattern throughout the day where we get notifications that we then go to check. And then as a result of checking those notifications, our brains get used to the habit of being distracted and getting interrupted to the point where we just start to check our phone out of instinct. I don't know if you've ever caught yourself doing this, but it's like just to get up from one room to the next, to kind of grab the phone, to look at it, and to see what's going to catch your attention. That ends up making the problem worse, and the cycle continues. And then for those of us who follow Jesus, that means that it's often very difficult to pay attention in church in settings like this. It is difficult to pray or to read our Bible for any length of time. And the result of all of this is many Christians who really do believe in God and really do love God, but they often just feel kind of distant from him. They don't feel aware of his presence. They don't feel very connected to him. They don't feel like God is speaking to them on a regular basis. Because usually when they try to pray or read their Bible, they kind of just find their mind wandering to other subjects. And then we go throughout our day, again, constant stimulation from music, YouTube, messaging, social media, and on down the list. I want to show you a quote from a writer named Andrew Sullivan. Devin, I know I'm skipping the one bullet point there, but we'll go to the quote. He said this. He said, in this new epidemic of distraction is our civilization's specific weakness. And the threat is not so much to our minds, even as they shapeshift under the pressure. The threat is to our souls. At this rate, if the noise does not relent, we might even forget we have any. And that's why I asked you to mark your place in Psalm 46. Because Psalm 46, like so many of the other Psalms, it does a really good job of painting a picture of the human condition. And then it also invites us as readers to kind of join in the prayer of the author. And I'm going to end today by returning to this idea of distraction and what it does to us spiritually and how that intersects with the end of Psalm 46. But first, I kind of want to take you through the Psalm, kind of line by line, in order to just better understand how someone who lived on the other side of the world 3,000 years ago, approximately, could write something so relatable. Psalm 46 is sometimes referred to by scholars as a song of Zion. There's a reference in verses 4-5 to the city of God, which is a pretty clear reference to the city of Jerusalem. If you're familiar with your kind of Bible history, Jerusalem functions as like the capital for the nation of Israel. And in Jerusalem, there was a temple, which was kind of like the most important place in that religion, in that culture. That temple was on a mountain that they refer to as Zion. So really, whenever you have a psalm that is emphasizing things like the temple or things like Jerusalem, sometimes scholars will refer to it as a song of Zion. But scholars also refer to this psalm as a song of trust. Notice the first 3 verses of the psalm. They write, God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore, we will not fear, though the earth give way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam and the mountains quake with their surging. So in other words, verses 2 and 3 kind of say, though all of these things may be true, the first line is the thesis statement of the song. God is our refuge. The Hebrew word that is used there for refuge refers to a place that is safe. It kind of creates this image of a stronghold or a fortress that nobody can break into. And the idea is it emphasizes God's protection. In other words, because we are with God, we are always safe. So verses 2 and 3 kind of give examples of natural disasters. If the earth were to give way, if the mountains were to fall into the heart of the sea, if mountains experienced earthquakes, even though those experiences would be scary, God would still be there with us because, as verse 1 says, he is an ever-present help in trouble. And then if you drop down to verse 6, they write this. They say, nations are in uproar. Kingdoms fall. He, being God, God lifts his voice and the earth melts. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Again, you can kind of see the refrain. The first part of the psalm in verses 2 and 3 specifically address natural disasters, earthquakes. Oh my gosh, if the waters were going crazy. But then this second part of the psalm addresses national disasters. When nations are in uproar, kind of paints the picture of when society feels divisive or unstable. Even when kingdoms and governments collapse, the Lord Almighty is with us. And then we get to verse 8. They say, come and see what the Lord has done, the desolation he has brought to the earth. He makes wars cease to the ends of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the shields with fire. Other translations will translate that last phrase as he burns the chariots with fire. It's just a matter of how that translation team decides to interpret the Hebrew. The point is that God can bring an end to war. Hence the examples at the end of him destroying military equipment. When the prophet Isaiah had a vision of God's renewed world at the end of time, Isaiah described it as a world without war. This is how the Living Bible translates Isaiah chapter 2, verse 4. He says, thinking about the future, the Lord will settle international disputes. All the nations will convert their weapons of war into implements of peace. Then at the last, all wars will stop and military training will end. And the prophet Ezekiel predicted something similar. He said it this way, Ezekiel chapter 39, verse 9. The people of the cities of Israel will go out and pick up your shields, your bucklers, your bows, your arrows, your javelins, your spears. Again, your military equipment. And they will use them to use for, not for war, but for fuel. So when you read Psalm 46, the writers are just picking up on this theme that the people of God have had for a long time, that in God's new world, in the future, one day, we're going to experience a world without war, a world where people do not have to suffer the violence or the pain that people experience in our world today. But in Psalm 46 specifically, the writer does not call us to look to the future. Rather, they say, look at what God has already done. And then, for the one and only time in this psalm, God actually starts talking. And here's what he says in verse 10. He says, he being God, God says, be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. Remember, one of the things they've imagined is national disaster. And I will be exalted in the earth when they've been thinking about natural disasters. At this point, the writers of Psalm 46 are basically trying to imagine situations that would be really bad, and then they are taking comfort from this idea God is our refuge. So they dream up worst case scenarios, earthquakes that devastate the land, empires and governments collapsing, society going into panic. For them, these are worst case scenarios. These are them wondering, how bad could our lives get? And I have to wonder if for you and I, though those situations and circumstances are bad and maybe they are scary, I have to wonder if we can imagine some situations, other worst case scenarios that maybe hit a little closer to home for us. Like, what if you were never to develop the friendships that you're hoping for? What if you don't get into the school that you want? What if your family's situation does not improve? What if the relationship that you're in doesn't work out? What if the shame or the anxiety or the eating disorder just never goes away? What if the tragedy that you worry about, what if that happens? For some of us, it's actually not the natural or the national disaster that really, really bothers us or that kind of keeps us up at night. For some of us, it's other situations. So if you'll entertain me for just a moment, I just want you to consider the situation that you would say personally, oh, that's probably worst case scenario for my life. Even if it's just this week or this month, just thinking about what would cause you to go into a panic. Thinking about the thing that you're afraid of, thinking about the things that you're afraid of losing, and then consider again the words that God spoke into this psalm. He says, be still and know that I am God. He doesn't say, hey, what are you guys worried about? Okay, good, let's make a plan for it. You got to start reading your Bible more. You have to start praying more. If you really want my help in this regard, you have to start living better. You have to start working harder and stop making excuses. And though I could probably find a Bible verse for all those things, I'm not saying those are bad. But right here in our passage, we have some God followers who are kind of wondering out loud, what is the worst case scenario for our lives? And where will God be in that moment? And what should we do about that right now? And God actually speaks to them in their prayer, and he says, just be still. The NASB translates verse 10 to say, stop striving and know that I am God. Or one commentator translated it the way on the bottom, relax and know that I am God. Which leads me to my big idea for the day from Psalm 46. If we want to feel like God is actually our refuge, if we want to know that he is close to us, and if we want to find a sense of hope and comfort despite our fears, our stress, or our anxiety, then we have to learn how to be still. Because living fast-paced, extra busy, mentally distracted all the time, it's not helping us to actually recognize him. Some of you, this is not a shot, but some of you, your kind of tempo, your rhythm is to wake up late most mornings, rush to school. You are at school all day, checking your phone every mental break that you have. You are with people, perhaps you have practice or a club, or you're hanging with friends after school. When you finally do make it home, you have a ton of homework to do, which you also tend to do with the phone out around, and it distracts you. By the end of your day, when you finally have time to relax, that usually involves some form of entertainment where you're shutting your mind off and you're just enjoying something, a show or a movie or whatever it is. Then you stay up a little late, you wake up the next morning, and you do that all over again. And then we can kind of live this rhythm and we can wonder, man, I don't really feel God lately. I don't feel like I'm hearing him. Maybe this faith thing isn't going to feel very real for me. For some of us, the time when we sense God the most is when we are here at church, when we are corporately in worship, or perhaps in a message or in a time of prayer. And though I really believe that something sacred happens when we all gather together like this, I also think that for some of us, the reason we experience God the most when we're here is because this is the only time when we're thinking about him. This is the only time when he actually has our attention. And again, my point is not to make anyone feel bad. I'm just trying to point out that for some of us, our rhythm and our routine is to go through life at such a fast pace and to engage with our devices in a way that is not helping us to notice God. Rather, it is causing us to be more mentally distracted and miss him as a result. But if we are willing to make a change, God says that on the other side of stillness is a greater awareness of him. That somehow when you and I actually engage in a practice like slowing down and stopping and listening and being quiet, that lifestyle tends to discover that he is God, that he is in charge, that he is a refuge and a safe place, and he is near to us. And that's why today marks week 1 of a theme that we are calling Teach Us to Pray. Because all throughout the narrative of Scripture, we can find models and instruction that teach us both why we should pray and how we should pray. And one of the premier places in the Bible for learning how to pray is the book of Psalms. They have been used for a long time, both in music and melody, to derive lyrics from. Most, if not all, of your favorite worship songs, or really any worship song, a lot of them, they're just taking passages from the book of Psalms, and then they are kind of rephrasing them in modern language for today. And the book of Psalms is also used for guiding us in prayer. So our goal for the next month is to look at a couple different Psalms and ask ourselves the question, what does this Psalm teach us about prayer? What does this Psalm teach us about why to pray, how to pray, and where God is in the midst of all of that? And the reason that we wanted to start with Psalm 46 is because of God's invitation in verse 10, when he says, "Be still and know that he is God." Because before you or I ever try to master a prayer rhythm, or before we ever learn how to intercede on behalf of others, before we learn how to engage in the spiritual warfare that happens when we pray, it is really important that we understand what prayer is. That prayer, it's not just a discipline that we need to get down, but it is actually an invitation to discover more of God. It's a call to stop living so distracted by the nonstop noise of news and notifications, and it is a place of encounter where you and I do not have to strive. We don't have to get it right. We don't have to worry about how do we sound. We actually don't even need to talk all the time. We just need to show up. We just need to practice giving our attention to the one who gave his life for us, and to trust the process that the more we show up, the more of God we'll actually see. Now, this can look different for everyone. So for this week's application, I'm going to suggest that you try any combination of the following. This is me trying to make the message very practical for everyone in the room. Here are 3 suggestions. First one, no phone or any kind of media before school. Second one, to turn off your phone or just put it away for an hour every day, and this is after school. Or the actual engaging practice would be 5 to 10 minutes of silence. Now, the goal is not for you to accomplish a challenge, okay? If you do these things, great, but the goal isn't just to do these things. The goal is to do 1, 2, or all of them so that over the next 7 days, and I'm only gonna suggest this for 7 days, you try out a different rhythm with the intention of freeing your mind up to pay more attention to God. Okay, I would never actually recommend Google's AI overview to be the only source that you check on a subject, but I did find it fascinating that the science on phone usage in the morning, it's kind of just so overwhelmingly conclusive that Google just gave me no pushback. I'm gonna show you a screenshot as it pertains to the first practice. When I looked up if it is bad to check our phone first thing in the morning, the results were basically a net negative for several reasons, including how checking our phone first thing in the morning, it can disrupt our sleep cycle, increase stress and anxiety, increase distraction, strain eyes, slow down the morning routine, and primes you to be distracted throughout the day. That list does not include the other things, such as kind of a rise in your baseline level of dopamine or the other mental health effects that are usually reported when someone is considering that. So that's a good start for some of us, is just when you wake up in the morning to not use your phone. Don't let that be the first thing that you use. Quite frankly, really don't use it until you need it, and try to limit usage before school. But we'll go to the next slide, because another version of this is the option that's in the middle, to turn your phone off or just put it away for 1 hour each day. And here we're thinking after school. This could be during an hour of homework where you're just concentrating. This could be during the time when you're going to have dinner with your family. Again, the goal isn't, oh, I did it, great. The goal is to become less tempted to check it by just kind of getting it away and becoming less distracted and more present to the task or the people who are in front of us. And then lastly, you can actually try to be still. 5 to 10 minutes. If you can do 10 minutes of stillness and like you're actually concentrated on God, that's amazing. You're approaching monk status in 2024. But basically, to take 5 to 10 minutes a day and just ideally, if you can do this in the morning when you wake up, having a couple minutes of prayer would not only do wonders for your nervous system, but it would set you up to potentially experience what God says in Psalm 46, verse 10. To be still and know that he is God. My goal with this message is basically to get you to consider, how distracted am I, or how distant do I feel? How distracted am I as I go throughout my day? How many times does my mind actually wander to the person of Jesus? How am I able to focus on things for an extended period of time? Or is my focus so broken and that muscle is so weak that I can't focus on homework for 10 minutes, let alone actually just spend devotional time with God? How distracted am I? And then as a result, how distant do I feel? Do I feel like I sense God at all? Do I feel like I hear from him every now and then? Do I feel his guidance or his encouragement in my life on any kind of routine basis? I don't want to paint a picture of spirituality that is false or that is idealistic. But I would say that if we are actively following Jesus, we should encounter him every now and then. And I don't know what comes to mind for you when you think of that. Maybe it's like this super powerful spiritual experience. That's not necessarily what I'm saying. But I am saying that if we are paying attention, God tends to love to connect with us, to speak to us, and to guide us. And my worry is that in our kind of modern pace of life, some of us are just becoming too distracted. And as a result, we are becoming more distant from God. And Psalm 46 is a bunch of writers who are basically saying, okay, what if life goes really bad? What if our plans don't work out? What if it looks like God doesn't show up? What are we going to do then? And you see God actually speak into the psalm and say, just be still. Because on the other side of stillness, on the other side of developing a routine of pausing and slowing down and turning our attention to God, he says, on the other side of that is a greater awareness and a greater knowledge that he is good, he is God, he is in charge, he's going to be exalted, he's going to take care of us, he's going to provide for us. I have to wonder if over the next 7 days, if we can change our rhythm just a little bit, if God won't show up, speak to us, guide us, meet us, encounter us, and encourage us. That's the kind of life that he wants us to experience. I just don't want to be too distracted to miss him.